Hi, I'm Anna, and this is the episode 3 of the Business of Aspiration. And I have a great pleasure to introduce a lady du jour. It looks like a founder and CEO of Brightland, the organic olive oil company, who seems to be making both the headlines but also melting on hearts with things that she is doing. And I wanted to talk to her like a couple of weeks ago because Brightland launched a platform, collaborative platform where different brands, all DTC brands that are from either hair care space or food space or cookware came together to make our lives more joyful, because that's aligned with Brightland's mission, is to bring joy, it's my understanding. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is because I think that we're seeing evolution of collaborations. It's not anymore like Supreme and Lamborghini. That was like three weeks ago they launched their collaboration. It's like great timing, guys. But also is the question, does anyone care anymore about those collaborations that are just a PR or marketing layer and not really, like, why do you collaborate these days? What do you really deliver? What is the purpose of collaboration, and what does collaboration really mean? Slapping two things together is not collaboration. Using one another in some sort of parasitical way also is not. So I would like to hear from someone who walked the walk and who actually came up with the idea and executed what really the future of collaborations is, or at least how brands should start to expand their thinking. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. And yeah, I think, my recommendation and sort of the way that Brightland thinks about any collaboration, big or small, and I want to talk a little bit more about that too, because I think the word collaboration gets thrown around left and right, and we don't even know, sometimes you don't know what that means, and it can be really overwhelming. But the way that we sort of think of it, we have a bit of a framework. I think actually, I want to take a step back and say, I think there are some people that just do it all intuitively. You have such a deep understanding of who your brand is that you don't need to think in framework. You just think instinctively, intuitively, and you say, this feels right. And I think at the end of the day, you need to tap into that as a founder and CEO of your brand, and really and listen to that. But if you want to apply some frameworks to it, one thing that we do is we always look at lens, depth, and destination to start, and then of course who we want to collaborate with. So if you want to dig into like lens a little bit, it's okay, is this for audience purpose? So one example of that is like Versace partnering with H&M. They're doing it for audience, right? Is there a, is it more purpose driven because the alignment is because of the purpose between the brands? And that a good example of that would be like Brightland and Sweetgreen. So we have a collaboration with Sweetgreen, but our values deeply align. So there's the kind of values and purpose alignment. And then finally, there's the emotional resonance is what I would call it. So one good example is the modern streetwear company Mad Happy. They did a collaboration recently with Apple Pan, and Apple Pan is like a very old LA diner. It's not like sexy, but it invokes nostalgia. So you can invoke different feelings based on the collaboration that you put together. Like Cheetos and Forever 21 is definitely a particular emotion, right? I think Kith did something with Coca-Cola a few years ago. That's also very nostalgic. So, and maybe there's also irony as an emotional resonance that you can tap into. So that would be the lens that, you should start and always look at. And then I would say the next kind of piece is depth. So like we were saying, we live in this age where collaboration can mean anything. So what does that even mean? Like, let's say for Brightland, we talk to a cookware company. We say, let's collaborate. Okay, that could mean a simple social giveaway. It could mean product swap and then some sort of content trade. It could mean each brand appearing on the others on our like content destination or blog. It could mean like some sort of a booklet about our company and all of their deliveries for their products and vice versa. I mean, the list can keep going, right? So that's kind of the first tier. And then maybe like the second tier could be something more meaningful, where it's maybe you come together and build something together, like an actual product together, or you build even something where you use new materials. So there's a little bit more innovation involved, maybe more design involved. So that's a little more in depth. So I think that that's really important, because a lot of times people will say, let's collaborate. And you want to really think through, like, how deep do you want to go with this person, and how long do you want this to last, because it is a reflection of your values and their values kind of coming together. And then finally, from a destination standpoint, so where do you want this collaboration to I guess live? Like, I'll give examples of Brightland. So we really truly believe that artist collaborations are a big part of our brand DNA. And we think of the Brightland bottle as a bit of a canvas. And we want artists that we feel like align with our values and our mission. And candidly, it's artists who were on my mood board when Brightland was nothing. We've partnered with now 4 of them who, like, it would have been a dream for me to even like reach out to them, but you know, now they've designed collaborative bottles. But all that to say, you know, you have this bottle, where does it live? It lives on our website only. The artist doesn't sell it, so that's like one destination kind of format. The second one would be there's an amazing bag company called Susan Alexandra. She's based in New York City. They're phenomenal, like handbags and accessories. She did a collaboration with the athletic brand Champion, but the place that, like, you know, you would be like, okay, maybe it's sold on Champion's website, or maybe it's sold on Susan Alexandra's website. It wasn't. It was sold on Urban Outfitters' website. So they roped in a third party, and that's the destination. And then another example is Brightland and Sweetgreen. We don't sell that bottle, the bottle that says Brightland for Sweetgreen. We don't sell it on our website. Sweetgreen sells it only in their stores. Mm-hmm. So that's another example of a destination. So it's really important to think through that, especially if there's a tactile, tangible component. Like, how is this being, where is it being housed? Like, what is the house for it? Right. So yeah, so those are the kind of 3, I think, like, pieces that we always look at and dig into. And then of course we start thinking about like who we want to collaborate with and what does that look like and why.
Right. I mean, this is really great, and already moves the needle, sort of how to think about collaborations. I was particularly, I'm sure I'm not the only one, was touched, I guess, is there? Maybe this is like emotional time, but I'm like, oh, look, this is like one company that does not compete with other companies, but actually brings them together. And that is something. So what was sort of the thinking behind you saying, I need to bring joy, because that's the DNA of my brand. This is my mission. I'm bringing joy. Yeah. And how can I bring joy right now? Well, like, how can I gather brands that people are inside? How can I make their life better?
I mean, kind of speaking particularly about that, and I think what you're referring to is our On the Bright Side, that series that we're doing. So basically, just to provide some insight, if you don't know what On the Bright Side is, listener or audience. So I think, you know, it was middle of March, early March, when things started just kind of shifting and people started working from home a little more, or, you know, sheltering in place, social distancing. And I quickly was like, okay, we were going to actually invest time and resources into doing dinner series, you know, in different cities. And we were going to do a lot. Brightland's brand is all about the analog over the digital. So I would love for us to like put down screens and phones as much as possible. And so that was the impetus, like, let's do things in real life. Especially because we're like a digital first company. I really wanted to lean in that direction, but it was obvious that that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So I said, okay, you know, what do people want and need right now? What are the different feelings they're going to be feeling? And one of them was just this notion of, you know, finding joy in the simple everyday. And like, very selfishly, there are amazing entrepreneurs and people in the wine world, people in the cheese world, people in the worlds that are adjacent and kind of like tangential to Brightland's world that I wanted to personally learn from. And I also wanted to champion them. Like, okay, are you a cheesemaker? Let's talk about cheese and talk about what we can do if you're by yourself and you want to do a cheese plate just for one. Let's talk about best practices around that. Let's eat some cheese, drink some wine, and then tell me like who are other cheesemakers that we should be supporting? How can we support you? So that was really the impetus behind it. And let's have these conversations that are delightful.
I think that's great. And I mean, this reminds me of a conversation that I had with East Fork, company. And I'm like, they're also like very thoughtful about what they're doing. So that seems like there is so many of so now companies, like when we're now thinking, we're like, oh, you know what, this is tragic, because when we go back, they're going to be like half of it small independent boutiques, restaurants, galleries, tradesmen. They're not going to be there. But talking to you guys, it seems like the new generation is coming, that maybe, yes, digital first, but it doesn't sound like, I see the same thoughtfulness, the same dedication to craft. And the dedication to quality, then say something like from the store that was in New York or I don't know, on Soho Street for 100 years. I think we should, yes, it is sad, but we should look forward. And for me, that kind of conversations that you're having between different providers and that they're having between sort of different parts of their value chain and the artisans and so on is something that I'm hoping to see more of. That collaboration becomes something like that, something that is like, what is, when you look at your value chain and when you look at your audience and say, how can I do good in all those different touch points?
100%. And I think like I've had a lot of questions asked, like, how do you decide who to collaborate with, whether it's a simple giveaway? Because we are very discerning about that, and I have no problem candidly saying no. And also there have been times when we've been approached and it's somebody that's so much bigger than us, and so it would be such a big deal to work with them, but I get the sense that they look at it almost like you should be lucky to work with us. And anytime I get that sense, that's not the right, a collaboration, whether it's a giveaway all the way to we come up with a product together and launch it, there has to be that two-way street and that respect for each other. Like you each feel like you're getting something out of it. And I can't stress that enough, because I think that sometimes as either whether you're smaller or you're newer or whatever it is, you sometimes feel like, oh, well, I'm the underdog, or, like this person's more established, or this company's more established. And you just have to remember that like you have a lot to bring to the table too. And they're tapping into you and you're tapping into them. And there should be that, there's just should be such a mutual kind of beneficial process. So that's like one thing that I think about a lot. And I think like every brand you should be protective. You don't need to be precious about it, like test and iterate, and you might make mistakes. Like we partnered with brands on giveaways or social swaps where I'm like, why did we do that? Like, a few weeks later, I'm like, why did we do that? So you're learning and you're doing that, but like maybe give time for that reflection in the first place. And also think about like, what feels good for each brand. And one exercise that I like to do, and I actually would love to share this with people, is so a simple way to do it is like take any industry, especially when there's a lot of brands in that particular industry, like footwear, for example, or you could do it with streetwear. You could do it with beauty. So let's take beauty for an example. You could say, okay, let's list 8 brands: Vintner's Daughter, Tatcha, Glossier, Maybelline, Elizabeth Arden. I listed 5. Out of those 5, who would you want to collaborate with, and what fits for your brand? You cannot collaborate with Maybelline and Vintner's Daughter. That makes no sense. Or maybe some people might argue with me and be like, no, you can, but I'd love to see like in what capacity, and maybe each partnership could look really different. But I would say try to think of the lens that you can work with one, and which of those really fits you and your brand. And when you do that over and over again, maybe write down like, okay, there's a lot of cookware companies and each one has its own different style and DNA, and even the way that they talk about their wares and their goods. Maybe dig into 6 or 7 of them and then think through who makes the most sense. Is it Le Creuset? Is it Great Jones? Is it Our Place? Is it Caraway Home? Like, who makes the most sense for my brand to align with right now? And then you kind of build that muscle where you understand your brand a bit more deeply.
Absolutely. And I think that that's also like, this is one way to sort of both execute and think about your brand identity exercise, because when you have do's and don'ts, when you're like, we're not going to collaborate, like, God bless them, but that's just not, that's not what our brand is about, So I think that, like, you achieve clarity about your brand identity, and so many things as a someone who helps brands build their identity on both brand and agency side. Like, it's so much easier when you have that sense of identity, because that all your decision making is filtered through
everything.
So it becomes so much easier. But I mean, the way you said it sounds simple, but it's very far from being simple. And I'm sure you know that as well, because sometimes you guys are seduced by someone's footprint.
Oh, 100%. Oh my goodness. And you can easily be seduced by, I always think of, potential collaborators, like, you kind of break them down into, it's a person. So an example would be, there's a nail polish and jewelry company called J. Hanna here in Los Angeles. They have like a very cult brand, but they're very successful. And Jess, the founder of that company, she herself at first was an influencer, and so she got tapped by like HP to come up with a laptop, like a collaboration with them. So that's a good example of like an influencer collaboration. Or for us, it would be the artist collaborations, or anyone who decides to work with a celebrity in any fashion, or a food influencer or something. So that would be like the person. And then the for-profit brand that aligns deeply, and that's in your industry. So for us, that's like Brightland and Sweetgreen. If it would be like 2 fashion brands coming together, like I think like Nike and Off-White. If it was, then you can go into for-profit brands that are not in your industry. So that would be the like Mad Happy Apple Pan, Mad Happy Curb Your Enthusiasm. God, there's so many. Like Hermes and Apple is a good example.
Or like Supreme Lamborghini. I mean, like,
exactly.
That's sort of, I'm more like, I think that's gonna keep going. What I'm thinking, and I would love to hear your take on it, I think that like brands are now like, I'm not going to be naive and be like, oh, we're going to come out of this like completely enlightened consumer and ever, like, I don't think, like, the muscle is too strong. The behavior, mass consumerism, and all of that is too strong. But I do think that brands are going to be like, maybe we should do something more for community, because that can be a like
100%. I'm so glad you're talking about this, because that's the 4th piece, and I think that piece is going to rise, and we're going to see popularity there, and that's organization and cause. And that's why I kept saying for-profit brand, for-profit, because I think there's going to be a cause, 501c3 way to collaborate. And candidly, we're in conversation with a 501c3 right now about doing something with them. And, nothing has been finalized, but that would be our first foray into it. And it means a lot to us. And I think that we're going to see a lot of brands start to do that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're like, that you also think about that and that you buy into that. I'm hoping that a lot of brands are not going to do that. Oh, that's corporate responsibility, or that's good PR, but they're actually going to.
Hope not.
You know what I mean? That they're going to put it like closer to what their brand DNA is and to how their organizations operate. So they're going to be like, oh, we're doing for profit, and then, like not for profit. And then that's going to be sort of like in parallel. What do you think about that? I mean, is that in your future?
I mean, for us, we don't even, it's just a part of it. Like, I'm not dividing it.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Like, it's part of, when I look at our like product roadmap or our collaboration roadmap, I'm not dividing it in any way. It is all encompassing, and it is 100% part of it. So But I also have the liberty of like Brightland is small, you know, we don't have to think about this like corporate social responsibility arm of the business and like, oh, how many millions are we giving, or what is the, like, we don't even need to think that way. We can just be really nimble and like stretch and all of that. I don't know what maybe an H&M or something like has to think about it totally differently.
Yeah,
I don't know.
what I'm hearing from you is you're basically setting it up right, because I mean you're at the beginning of a steep growth path, hopefully. So like, you know, like you get to 100 million to 500 million, but if you set those practices like that early on, that is going to be much easier to implement them at scale, rather than having that as an afterthought, which was, I would say, in time before. So I think, yeah,
I think that's right. But I'm excited personally to see causes like, for example, that nail polish, the cult nail polish company, J. Hanna, they partnered with Planned Parenthood and came out with a nail polish line, and they sold it. And from a destination, coming back to our conversation, destination wise, it wasn't sold on her site or through Planned Parenthood. It was sold through one of the stores that they valued the most, called LCD here in LA. And like the nail polish bottle was sold there, and they did events around it and really turned it into a thing. And I just love that so much, because I think that that's just, and it fits the brand, because I do know her and it just fits so well.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's an amazing example. And because you do, when you have that sort of collaboration, you do want a message to sort of travel far. And the way you do that is sort of be very specific, be very sort of, I don't want to say exclusive, because it's not, but it's kind of very
focused,
considered. Exactly. Very specific, very focused, very considered. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to switch gears now in this later part of our conversation, and just ask you about, how do you see like domestic taste regimes being formed right now? Because I wrote about that after I came back from Japan at the end of February, before all of this, and we're seeing like Venkatesh Rao, like he's writing about domestic cozy, and now in the great indoors, and now that it's not aspirational anymore, because we are still
like we're forced
that that's reality. It's not aspirational. It's like it's not aspirational realness. It's realness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like all those magazines focused on nice things and good life, and like very considered elements in your home, and the rituals, how you make coffee in the morning and all of that. And by very nature of your products, you're sort of part of that. So are you seeing something that's being like, is it being elevated more luxury, or is it going in the more mass direction, what you're seeing?
I think that it comes back to mental health. Beyond looking at it in luxury and mass, it's back to mental health, because we are processing more images in one day than our ancestors did in 1 year. And what does that do to your brain? And what does that do to your heart and your soul? Like, the reason why, maybe at some point, in 2011, 2012, when kinfolk started being popular, at that point, maybe it was a little early to talk about, your coffee ritual. So it was a little bit like, oh my goodness. But now people are craving that, because you need a mental health break from the screen. And what we're seeing, because we're all at home all the time, we're basically stuck doing this all the time. And it's extremely draining. And I think you want to step away from it. So I think people, no matter, where you are, you're going to want to step away from your screens in some form or format, and do something that just takes you out of it and reminds you that you're living life in a 3-dimensional way.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, really. I was thinking less about it, but thank you for bringing that dimension, for sure, because I'm thinking we are all now becoming more of experts in those domestic, like cooking experts, or maybe decoration experts, because that's what we are spending a lot of our time on now, So I'm like, and that is almost like, influencers used to go around the world, and we had FOMO, and now like no one really has FOMO, because no one is really going anywhere, and those who do go somewhere, they get socially shamed. So I'm like seeing like how is that different? Is there ever going to be some sort of differentiation? Or my olive oil is better than yours, like, because how people always need to, they always have a need to sort of like convey their status or to, and their distinction. So I'm sort of thinking, do you see your product being used as a status symbol or no? Or is that you're not thinking about it like that?
I don't think that I've thought about it like that, candidly. I think we do see it. We do see people share it proudly, share what they're making with it. But I think that's the broader, like, just people are hungry, pardon the pun, people are hungry to see what other people are eating, and people are so proud to share the actual food.
Mm-hmm.
And they love to say, of course, we incorporated Brightland, or, they'll say that, but I think they're more proud of the food that they've made from start to finish. And they are like really excited to showcase that. But that doesn't but I still think that you're right. Like, people love to share what's in my bathroom, or kind of what's the like facial cleanser I'm using. So I think that still, it exists and will continue to kind of, I don't see that going anywhere.
Yeah, and I definitely think that you guys are definitely part of that showcasing of what am I making, because like when you don't have time, when you live like life before, you wouldn't have time to spend so much like detail, so much care to make something. So I think that's going to, do you think that's going to continue?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
It's going to be, I'm thinking it's going to be very hard to go back to restaurants after this, because like my husband is like cooking every night and it's really good, and I also do crave restaurant experience. I want other people, I want noise, I want all of that, but at the same time we eat very, there is some joy in cooking your own food.
There is, but I think it's also tiring. Dishes are tiring. I'm hearing that a lot. I'm seeing that a lot. I think people with children, it's really tiring.
Yes.
So, so I think there's something to be said about somebody making something really wonderful for you, and you go there and you enjoy it, and you enjoy the company that you have around you, or you're sitting by yourself and enjoying that experience. Maybe that experience evolves, and maybe we're all like, it's like, we all have dividers or something. I'm not sure for the time being, but at the end of the day, like, we're social beings, and we want to be, I think, I don't think it'll ever just be like one way or the other. I think it'll always be a little bit of a mix. But I do think that people who have picked up cooking now, who weren't cooking that much before, or have, tried and tested new recipes, I think that they'll be empowered and kind of excited to like share that in an ongoing way. So maybe it'll be more dinner parties at home or something like that.
Yeah, 100%.
I love dinner parties.
And I even think like this digital sharing of food, that's our way to be social right now.
Exactly.
Like, it can't be like physically social, but by sharing that, like what we've made, these are the rituals that used to gather us. We can't mourn our dead. We can't sit by the side of people who are sick right now. We can't eat together. We can't celebrate together. So that sort of sharing is a way for us to still have some sort of social cohesion.
100%. There's actually an amazing New York Times article that just came out a couple of days ago about community cookbooks. And they're not fancy. They're just, on spreadsheets, and you share what you made and maybe your notes and your thoughts on it and maybe a couple pictures. And they're spreading like wildfire. I'm a part of a couple of community cookbooks, actually.
Amazing.
And it's just a simple spreadsheet.
To do something like that, because you're so lucky to be part of something that's so primal and so like core of human existence. And I think you'll always have like a lot of ways and people to collaborate with at the end of the day. I would love to see a Brightland cookbook.
Well, one thing that we did for Mother's Day was, I know Mother's Day can be a tough day for some people. We really wanted to honor the mothers of the past and like our moms, and kind of look to recipes of the past. So we collected from collaborators, so some of the artists that we worked with and some members of kind of our Brightland community, we asked them to share either their moms or grandmothers or aunts, like a woman in their life that kind of is a mother-like figure, an old recipe. And then we've compiled that into a recipe journal. And so so it's exciting because people are buying Mother's Day gifts, and we're including that as a gift for them. And the recipes are hilarious. Some of them are too funny. I'm going to have to send it to you afterwards.
Please do. I mean, this is
I'm going to send
And I think you should promote like the hell out of it on
I haven't talked about it on Twitter or
I
anything.
mean, because this is so, it's truly like both heartwarming, but it also has a wink to it. Like, I think it's great. Please do share it. Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, I mean, love it. Of course, I should have known that you came up already with that idea. I mean, communal cookbook. Well, thank you so much, and keep the great work
Thank
doing.
you.
And to our audience, like, follow Brightland, and this woman is amazing. And I'm really glad that our paths crossed. And
Me too.
yeah.
I really appreciate it. I had a wonderful time. Could have kept talking for forever. This is super.
Stay in touch. Yeah.
Thank you. Talk